This episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind might make you feel a little deflated. That's because Giorno and all of his brand new Mafia pals are being attacked by a mysterious stand user, and it's up to Abbacchio to save the day with his stand, the Moody Blues. Things are about to get ultra weird and super stylized, my friends, because we're going to take a look at another episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind. First, let me just say that there are two MVPs for this episode right here. It's not just one, it's going to be Abbacchio and Bruno. Watching these guys in action in this episode was just an absolute joy. I especially love that we actually got Abbacchio's backstory, which was something that I was not expecting. Apparently, Abbacchio is a former police officer, someone who grew up believing in true justice. The problem is, he grew up in Italy, which is run by gangs and the mafia, and that's basically twisted his entire view on what it means to be a police officer and what true justice is. It also sucks because he is a cop, everybody seems to bust his chops. Nobody seems to trust him, and they seem to want to look more towards the mafia than anything else. This combined with the fact that there was this incident where he let this one criminal go, only to run into him later on and learn that he actually killed someone. He decides that this is too extreme, he has to arrest him, but of course he knows that if he does this, he'll get in trouble for letting this guy off earlier. That's when his partner decides to jump out John Woo style and ends up getting killed right before his eyes. This manages to freak him out enough to the point where he ends up getting outed to the rest of his fellow police officers. He is fired and goes down a dark rabbit hole of transforming into a ridiculous, super flamboyant JoJo character and drinking very heavily. It was only until he met Bruno that he decided to change his ways, which is to say he's now just a fan of pissing into teapots and watching people drink pee. In all seriousness, Abbacchio in this episode was fantastic. I really liked his backstory. It was a nice contrast to where he actually is now in the story. But one of the biggest highlights, of course, is that we finally get to see his stand in this episode, and his stand is known as the Moody Blues. Of course, a reference to the band of the same name. It is worth mentioning yet again, if you are watching this episode with English subs due to copyright, they decided to call his stand Moody Jazz, despite the fact that you can clearly hear him say Moody Blues. But outside of the name Moody Blues, I'm not really sure if there's any other references to their songs. What I'll say is that his stand is very unique and unlike anything that we've seen from the series. Moody Blues has the ability to replay anything. What that means is his stand is essentially a giant VCR. It has the ability to replay events which have already happened. He can freeze them, pause them, fast forward, rewind, and because they can reenact actual events that happened with people, it's a really great investigative style technique. Not necessarily something that you're going to use in a fist fight, but still something that I think is going to end up being very useful to the entire team. So most of this episode follows Abbacchio and Bruno as they desperately try to figure out what this stand user is doing, what their powers are, and how their friends are suddenly just disappearing. Thanks to the use of Moody Blues, they're able to recreate all of the events which happened, in particular with the character of Narancia, and they get to see how he was attacked. The stand user has the ability to deflate people, like a literal balloon, like a puncture wound appears on their body and all of this air suddenly starts exploding out of them, and then they shrivel up into a little balloon-like person. The stand user is then able to take them away and hide them from sight. Now, most of the tension of this episode came from the fact that they're trying to figure out where this stand user is, and it seems very obvious. Just follow the fly that Giorno created and they'll be able to find this guy. But every single time that Bruno manages to open up a hole in the ship and find him, he's nowhere to be seen. Abbacchio even goes as far as to send his stand Moody Blues into the piping of the ship to try and follow this guy around, but he ends up getting attacked and punctured as well, turning into a balloon, but he leaves one clue behind. He manages to leave a trail of his blood around so that Bruno can actually follow this, and then begins the mystery of how this stand user works. And honestly, I was scratching my head the entire time trying to figure out, how is this guy hiding people even though they clearly are supposed to be in plain sight? There were a lot of clues earlier on, but I never actually noticed them. Basically what this stand user did is that he took another one of these yachts and deflated it. He then took the deflated ship and placed placed it over the entirety of another one, the ship that these characters were actually on. Bruno actually ends up figuring this out when he decides to use his stand sticky fingers to put a hole in the bottom of the ship. This means the entire ship starts to capsize, and what was everything on the outside starts to finally break away. Basically, this guy has been retreating to the other ship, which has actually just been covered by the giant deflated one the entire time, allowing him to move seamlessly between these two layers of ship. One that was actually a real one, and one that was simply deflated. It might sound a little confusing, but honestly, it's pretty freaking satisfying when it is revealed. And I have to say, Bruno's big moment when he actually saves the day was all sorts of badass. I love that he's able to use his stand to sort of throw its fist almost like a rocket punch with the zipper, which sort of like extends out from his body. He even goes as far as to defeat this guy by decapitating him. Which is not to say he decapitates him so much as he, uses his zipper ability to remove his head. But the episode ends with Bruno basically saving the day, and a lot of that is owed to Abbacchio and his investigative skills with the Moody Blues. So what's the rundown on this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind? This was a great showcase for the character of Abbacchio. It's perfect that they started with him. He was the character who had the biggest issues with Giorno. He simply just did not trust him. It was in this moment that he realized that he was able to sort of utilize his stand to the best of his abilities. And he was doing this not really to save Giorno, but basically just to one-up him, because Giorno challenged him, saying that there's no way he'd be able to figure out this mystery. Abbacchio is an absolute man on a mission in this episode, and I really appreciated his backstory. The look of him as a cop is really freaking funny, I have to say. It's so different than the character that we actually see now. He almost looks kind of normal, if not for the fact that he still has a goofy hair, very piercing eyes, and those giant JoJo lips. It also officially confirms that Abbacchio himself is probably a little older than some of the other characters we've seen thus far. I thought they were all kind of the same age, but for this guy to have been a previous police officer is interesting. I wish they would delve a little bit more into his backstory with Bruno and how he actually got his stand powers in the first place. I'm guessing maybe he went through the test with Pulpo and maybe was actually stabbed by Black Sabbath with the arrow, which allowed him to manifest his stand abilities, or maybe he just gained it when he was going through a drunken stupor. I don't know. But the Moody Blues is a really unique stand. It almost has like a weird alien-like appearance to it. And what I love is when it actually imitates someone, it literally looks just like them, except that it has the timer on their forehead. And even when things are missing from the actual scene of the crime or anything, it'll still act out everything that actually happens, even when the enemy is not there. It's the perfect way to actually investigate these type of things, and I have a feeling it's going to come up a lot like that as the actual series is going to go on. I'm sure there's a number of other applications that Abbacchio is going to be able to use with Moody Blues, and I can't wait to see how all of that's going to play out. That combined with Bruno utilizing his stand sticky fingers made me realize that these might be some of the most creative powers that we've actually seen from JoJo thus far, and it's got me so pumped to see what else the rest of the series is actually going to deliver. So the episode ends with the implication that everyone is saved and they're about to be a lot richer when they find Pulpo's treasure. I'm sure that's going to manifest in the next episode. We could be going on a pretty big adventure here. I don't know. As someone who does not read the manga, I can honestly say, looking forward to JoJo every week. That's like my favorite thing right now because it is so unpredictable, and like I said, throughout most of this episode, I just kept scratching my head as to how can they not find this guy? How is he doing this? Is he in another dimension or something? No, I didn't even think about the possibility of the fact that the ships that they were on were completely different what they originally started, and that he deflated his ship and actually did it. It is quite ingenious and really speaks to the creativity of the creator of this show. I really know now why people love this so much. It's not just the ridiculous gaudy character designs, it's the world they exist in and the powers they give them. It's always a great surprise to watch JoJo. This episode just absolutely freaking worked. I really hope that all the different members of Bruno's gang are going to get this sort of attention, as it's the perfect vehicle for allowing me to actually care about them, knowing their backstory. Knowing that Abbacchio is a disgraced police officer completely changes how I view the character, because initially I just looked at his outward appearance and saw him as just a typical weird-looking JoJo character. There are so many more layers to him now that I know everything about his past and the things that he actually went through, and it makes me want to see more of his mafia adventures Can't wait for more. This episode freaking rocked. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5, and you guys need to check it out. If any of you did watch this episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Your favorite moments from this episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you think of Abbacchio and his stand, the Moody Blues? And what do you hope to see from the rest of Golden Wind? Thank you guys for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.